all of a sudden, with a different candidate shaping up, as you've seen, it's Harris is now confirmed as the pick. It's beginning to look like it could be a mistake, especially as she chooses someone, and she thinks she's going to, who's perhaps more moderate than her. It's seemingly Trump seems to be backing out of the agreed date with Biden, which was for a debate on September the 10th, hosted by ABC News. And we've seen this in several ways because he's been telling various Fox News interviews, actually, that he would absolutely debate Harris, but, everybody knows him, and why does he need to debate, really? And he told the National Association of Black Journalists once again that he thinks ABC News is fake news because the main questioner on Tuesday, when he frankly said some very strange things and called into question whether Kamala Harris was really black, for example, in front of a black audience, the main questioner there was from ABC News, who he described as horrible and rude. And so he seems to be preparing to back out of this commitment that he had with Biden. And I couldn't tell you, really. This has been such a incredible race full of surprises. I couldn't tell you where and when they will debate, but I imagine the polling will show them pretty much neck and neck going forward. And if they are, then they probably will end up debating at some point.
Charles Franklin, what would be the value and how likely do you think that it will happen?
Yeah, I think it'll probably happen, but I think Trump has an interest in making it seem like it might not, and keeping control, making it look like he's the one that's controlling whether to debate or not, possibly holding out for a friendlier venue for maybe a additional debate. He's talked about that. But I agree that it looks at this point likely to remain a close race. That gives each candidate some incentive to do the debate in hopes of tipping the balance.
Let's talk also, shall we, about there's many issues to get into, but J.D. Vance, it's interesting because many people were talking about when he was first announced about his interesting background, about the book that he had written. It felt that people seemed to be quite, pleasantly surprised, kind of across the board, really, that this person had been picked. But there have been concerns slowly brewing in the Republican camp that Trump has picked the wrong running mate now in J.D. Vance. Former Bush and Reagan advisor Doug McKinnon dispelled these concerns and told Times Radio that Vance has got the qualities to get Trump elected to the White House.
J.D. Vance, is a very bright guy. Obviously, he went to Yale. He's, his attraction for Trump also, aside from carrying on his agenda, is going to be to try to flip some votes in the Rust Belt. And ultimately, it comes down to taking 1/8% from one county, 1/4% from one district, 1/8% from one state. That's how you win a presidential election. You just shave off vote after vote after vote. And J.D. Vance still has the potential to do that for Trump.
Right, we'll talk a bit about J.D. Vance in a second, but I'm just going to read out a tweet from Kamala Harris, who has announced that I'm honoured to be the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. I will officially accept the nomination next week. So it looks like this is going to happen. This campaign, she says, is about people coming together, fueled by love of country, to fight for the best of who we are. David Charter, on the J.D. Vance issue, do you think that there are any real concerns amongst the Republicans that this actually perhaps was not quite the right choice?
There are real concerns that we've seen developing this week, not least because of the switch out by the Dems from Biden pulling out, obviously not long after the Republican convention ended and Vance was chosen, because he was clearly chosen by Trump with a sort of base strategy to excite his MAGA base, if you like, because he's just as MAGA or more MAGA than, and that's Make America Great Again, the kind of the way that Trump really describes his own movement rather than the Republican Party. And all of a sudden, with a different candidate shaping up, as you've seen, Harris is now confirmed as the pick. It's beginning to look like it could be a mistake, especially as she chooses someone, and she thinks she's going to, who's perhaps more moderate than her, because she does have a very liberal record in the Senate, for example. Someone who's a bit more moderate, who can reach out to people that she can't reach. That's not what Trump did. Trump could have picked someone who was very different to him, female perhaps, moderate perhaps, but that's not what he went for. And I think it's in the light of the switch that and following that, we've had the emergence of various comments that Vance has made to the media over the years, which have come back to bite him.
Charles, do you think that any concerns that there might be about JD Vance, are they about him and some of the stuff that's been unearthed about him, the childless cat ladies, etc., or is it more to do actually with Kamala Harris's star shining?
Well, I think at the moment it's the Vance comments from the past. There's a wealth of material there that was predictable that was going to be brought forward by the Democrats, and now it has been. At the convention, we heard a lot about J.D. Vance campaigning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the three upper Midwest swing states. So far, he's not visited those states. He's been to Arizona and Georgia and Nevada, but I don't think we've seen him in Wisconsin yet. Now, I'm sure we will see him soon, but I was prepared for him to be doing major swings through these three Midwest states. And in fact, he's concentrated elsewhere.
What do you think, Charles, about, do you think that this will, sorry, David, do you think this will pass? Do you think this is something that can be repaired? Because, or do you think that the stuff is going to keep coming out and it's going to have a kind of cumulative effect? Or do you think that this can be fixed in some way as far as J.D. Vance is concerned?
Well, the Democrats have been doing their homework, and just about every day they've been rolling out a new hair-raising quote from the past to show Vance, perhaps to highlight his true character, the sort of thing that the parties normally do in advance is to vet their candidates, just to see what skeletons there are in the closet. And maybe this was done. Maybe the Trump campaign was fully aware that he called Kamala Harris a miserable, childless cat lady in the past. Maybe he was aware that Vance said that childless adults should not have the same weight of vote as adults with families in the election. But this stuff keeps coming out, and well, if the Dems can keep finding this stuff, then it's going to be embarrassing. And Trump himself was squirming about it at his appearance in Chicago this week when he was asked about his choice of Vance, and he said, "Oh." He tried to be very dismissive of it and saying, you announced the running mate at the convention, and then he goes away. He doesn't matter. The focus should be on me, is effectively what Trump said. But when the focus is on Vance, Trump doesn't like that either.
America is a country that there are many different ethnicities. There are mixes within that, dual heritage, and all the rest of it. I mean, does Donald Trump, was he being clumsy, or does he not quite understand that someone can have a dual heritage?
Oh, I think this was a deliberate decision by him to do it. You have to wonder exactly what he hopes to achieve by it. He certainly grabbed the attention back to himself that had been heavily focused on Harris, and that has been something Trump has done in the past. When people are ignoring him, he tends to say something outrageous, and people then pay attention to him. I do think that the amount of mixed racial families in the country and mixed ethnic heritage beyond race does make the country quite a diverse country. Indeed, his own running mate has a Indian and white family. Yeah. So it's sort of a bizarre attack that way. But is he trying to push a message about Harris's authenticity? Is he just trying to get attention, knowing that this too will pass away, but he will have seized the day in terms of attention? And it is true that following those remarks, there's been a lot more attention to him than there was to him in the days leading up to that. Whether that's a plus or a minus, though, I think very much is in doubt.
Yeah.
Plays to his base, I
yeah.
think.
David, briefly, do you think the authenticity point will land?
No, I think that's a rather 2008 approach from Trump. He tried it, of course, by questioning Barack Obama's true nationality, suggesting he wasn't a natural-born American, so he couldn't be president. He was one of the leaders of that so-called birther movement that left a very sour taste, and I think missed the mark, because if it was meant to sort of sow suspicion, as this is, among black voters, I think it will have the reverse effect, actually, and will perhaps only serve to motivate them.
Harris leads by 11 points among women, by 51% to 40. This is in a poll of 1,170 registered voters. It was taken on July the 22nd to the 23rd. But Trump holds an even more dominant 18-point lead among men, by 54% to 36, producing a net gender gap of 29 points. That's a lot of numbers to get your head around. Charles Franklin, I presume, well, has Donald Trump always done better with men than women?
Yes, and Republicans generally have. Women as a group lean substantially more Democratic in their partisanship, while men are not nearly as Republican. Men are not as Democratic as women are. So part of this is underlying partisanship, that you get a gap because women are more Democratic, men are more Republican, rather than a specific reaction to the candidates. Now, in the switch from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris, we of course have a moment where gender becomes more salient in this choice. And the gap is something that will, and every pollster, be tracking all through the election. But this has been a growing divide in recent years. But the divide actually goes back to its origins in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan.
And David, what do you think? What difference does this make in terms of, I don't know, in terms of policies, in terms of messages and tones when it comes to the election campaign?
Oh, well, both sides are well aware of the dynamic, of course, and it means we've seen Harris considering an all-male shortlist for her vice president to balance the gender of the ticket in that way that Trump didn't consider. It means that she in fact may get a warning from history, because someone I spoke to when I was in Atlanta for the rally this week warned that Harris's speech was very much leaning into more female issues, if you like. There was a lot of talk of not only the big issue of abortion rights, that's a very big issue across the board in America, but increasing childcare, increasing parental leave. These themes tend to dominate, or at least feature strongly in her speeches. And the warning from history was that there was the first black female candidate for governor in Georgia who had an enormous female backing on the Democratic side in that state, also leaned into very much family-friendly issues. And twice she missed the mark, despite the fact that she had enormous publicity and huge amounts of volunteers knocking doors and campaigning for her. And that is perhaps a lesson that the Harris campaign needs to learn, that they have to try and get back the male in with the male vote. So they have to find a way to appeal more to that demographic.
Yeah, that is really interesting. We're going to finish by talking about Evan Gershkovich, Wall Street Journal reporter, of course, who's returned to the US after more than a year in a Russian prison. His release was secured as part of an exchange involving 26 prisoners, 7 countries. And President Biden was, of course, there. So was Kamala Harris to receive him. Charles, what do you think Donald Trump would have done in a situation like that? Because he famously said that he was the only one who could fix this.
Yes, well, he says that about a lot of things. And the fact is that Trump did not return at least one other American in Russian custody while Trump was in office. And Trump has not talked a lot about Dershowitz. So I think there's a question about that. We saw the Trump campaign quickly take credit for the release, saying, well, they did this because they knew I will be president in January. That's typical for a campaign statement, but a little a little out there, I think. The point, I think, is that this is a very complicated deal that was put together and took some significant international negotiation.
Mm.
Whether you credit Joe Biden or his foreign policy staff, nevertheless, the deal got done. The prisoners are home.
Yeah. David, how do you think, briefly, how do you think Donald Trump would have handled this?
I think he would love to have had such a deal. I mean, he is the guy who wrote the art of the deal. And there's no question that it plays very strongly for an American president to see wrongly detained Americans arriving back on the tarmac at Andrews Air Force Base. I mean, that would have been a boost, no doubt, to Biden's campaign if it was still underway. But Kamala Harris, of course, made sure she was there to be in the welcoming party. We are hearing, of course, from Trump that it's a terrible deal, that killers have been released, and it's a win for Putin. And this is really just what happens in an election year.
Well,
it's electioneering.
Exactly that. This is what happens in an election year. David, thank you so much. David Charter, Assistant US Editor at The Times, and Charles Franklin, Director of Marquette Law School, Poll. Thank you to both of you.